All right, more reaction from Thanksgiving Day in the NFL. First, joined by Farhan Lalji from Jerry World. Farhan, not many fans have put Dak Prescott in the same category as Patrick Mahomes, but the reality is Prescott is leading the #1 ranked passed offense in the league going into this game. Chiefs just had no answers for them, did they?
Jay, Dak threw that early interception, which the Chiefs needed only 2 plays to put into the end zone. But then after that, the Cowboys quarterback really settled in. Chiefs defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo dialed up all sorts of pressure against Dak, especially in the first half. He stared it down and he dominated. He was 15 of 18 for 190 yards against the blitz. And with 5-man pressure, the Chiefs were only able to pressure Dak 15% of the time. So he was really comfortable. He became the first quarterback this season to throw for over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, and take no sacks against pressure. And he was comfortable in all situations. You look at this team on third downs. Dallas was 9 of 16, and these weren't short third down opportunities. You look in the first drive alone, he converted 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, then 3rd and 10 for the touchdown. Late in the game, Dak said, we didn't want to give the ball back to Mahomes. We know what he can do, so they were going to be aggressive. They weren't just going to try to run it out. You saw the slant he completed with 2 minutes left to Pickens, and that pretty much iced the game. So Dak is playing as well as possible. If you can't get to him, he's going to make you look bad. And once again, passer rating by the end of the game finished over 100.
What about the Chiefs? We've talked about their inability to win close games this year. After winning in overtime last weekend, their first one-score win of the season, now just 1-6 in that situation. So what did the Chiefs not do on Thursday?
Jay, it starts with penalties. The Chiefs took 10 of them for 119 yards in this game, and that's just not what winning teams do. Even if you don't turn the ball over, which Kansas City didn't do tonight, you've got to find a way to avoid the penalties. In the second half of this game, they took 5 pass interference penalties defensively alone. That's the most by any team in the second half of a game, accepted penalties, that is, in the last 35 years. You go to that final drive where Dak had to throw the ball. They took 2 pass interference penalties there. Also in the first half of this game, they had 2 drives derailed by offensive line holding penalties. And the injuries right now along the offensive line aren't helping. They began this game without their right guard, Trey Smith. As the game progressed, they lost both of their starting tackles, so you finish the game with 3 backup offensive linemen. And this offense is entirely dependent on Patrick Mahomes to run around and create his own explosives. And he almost pulled it out again in this one with 4 touchdown passes, but he was hit often. He was pressured 15 times. He was hit 9. He was sacked 3. Quinnen Williams with 5 pressures for Dallas. That defense looks better with him in the lineup. But for the Chiefs, they've got to find different ways to move the ball, and they can't beat themselves with penalties.
And now the Cowboys are back in the playoff conversation, and they're doing it during a stretch of games that was supposed to break them, Farhan. The Chiefs are hanging on. How would you assess the chances of either of these teams getting into the playoffs?
Yeah, and suddenly, who would have thought the Cowboys are back in the playoff conversation? 3 straight wins, as you mentioned. But also, who have they beat? Well, they've beaten the last 3 Super Bowl champions in Kansas City and Philadelphia. They've done that in 4 days. Dak Prescott says he's not sure if he's been a part of 2 more impressive victories. And now, all of a sudden, games against Detroit and Minnesota coming up with how those 2 teams are playing, they don't look so daunting. Brian Schottenheimer said, we will play any team, anytime, any place. And when you look at the Chiefs, there was a thought coming into this game that they really could lose one more, but it couldn't be this one because they play the Texans, the Chargers, and the Broncos, and they lose tiebreakers with everybody. So Kansas City is almost in win-out territory if they want to get back into the playoffs.
The Cowboys have a 3-game win streak, including consecutive wins over the last 2 Super Bowl teams, Eagles and Chiefs. Farhan, thanks for this. Now, let's bring in Dave Naylor from Ford Field in Detroit. Great to see you, pal. Quite the statement performance by the Packers. What do you see as the keys to victory?
Well, Jay, I think it was pretty clear that the Packers' #1 objective coming into this game was going to be shutting down Jahmyr Gibbs, and they did that very effectively at 20 carries for 68 yards. When you combine it with the way they limited him in week #1, and overall that's 29 carries for 87 yards against Jahmyr Gibbs, who a lot of people think is the NFL's Offensive Player of the Year. When you're talking about a Detroit team that didn't have Sam Laporta, who's out for the year, then Amon-Ra St. Brown goes out early in this game. So ultimately, when they weren't able to get the run game going, that put a premium on Jameson Williams. And as we all know, Jameson Williams is a high variance player. He had no catches a week ago against the Giants. He had just 23 yards receiving when they met the Packers in week #1, but he went off in this game. 7 catches for 177, a career high for him. But that also turned it into a bit of a quarterback battle. And I think the Packers were happy to have that happen. Ultimately, Jordan Love wasn't being pressured, wasn't being affected at the line of scrimmage. I thought Detroit played very well on the back end of their defense. There were contested catches all over the field all day, but Love was deadly accurate. And ultimately, when he wasn't being pressured, Jared Goff was, especially when the Lions got in those third and long situations, obvious passing situations at the end of the game. That allowed Micah Parsons to rack up 3 sacks, and he really did have a big effect on this game. I mentioned Jameson Williams with a 7 for 77. Also have to mention he had a bad drop in the fourth quarter in the red zone on one of the Lions' fourth down gambles that did not work out.
Yeah, let's talk about that drop by Williams, one of 2 fourth down gambles that blew up on the Lions. Fourth down, again a problem for the Lions, and that was obviously a key to this game.
Well, when Dan Campbell got to the podium, that was the first thing out of his mouth. He said it came down to the fourth down gambles. They were 0 for 2, and of course, the Packers were able to close out the game on a fourth down gamble that was a perfect throw by Jordan Love. And you look at the 2 fourth down gambles. One of them is on their first possession early in the third quarter. It was a series where they ran the ball 4 straight times with Jahmyr Gibbs. In fact, it was 6 out of 7. It got some boos from the crowd in the fourth down call. And Dan Campbell said he didn't think the play call put them in the best situation. He's the play caller. Of course, Jordan Love hit Christian Watson for a 51-yard pass right after that, and they were back in the end zone. And of course, the other fourth down was in the fourth quarter. They're down by 10, could have gone for a field goal. A lot of people would have said they should have. Instead, they throw, Jameson Williams gets open, and he drops the ball. And it wasn't just that they didn't come away with points on that drive. It took up 6 minutes. Their next drive, which ended in a field goal to close the game to 7 points, that one took up 6 minutes. And there were boos raining down from the crowd here at Ford Field on some of the play calling and certainly the pace of the offense during that last Detroit drive. But ultimately, 12 minutes of play, most of it in the fourth quarter, coming away with just 3 points. And then ultimately, when Green Bay got the ball back, the Lions were not able to affect them in the line of scrimmage, and Jordan Love was able to close out the game. So tough schedule ahead for the Detroit Lions. They're now 7-5 on the season. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Dan Campbell said afterwards he wasn't sure, could be a week or two. And other Detroit news, Frank Ragnow, their all-pro center who retired shortly before training camp and by all accounts was permanently retired. He called Dan Campbell on Wednesday, said, "I'm coming back." Dan Campbell can't wait to see him show up in Detroit.
Well, the timing's good. This is the Packers' first season sweep of Detroit since 2020. Dave Naylor, thanks for this.